UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Good evening and welcome to UAP Crossfire, greatest audience on the planet on KGR Radio DB. My two co-hosts, Christopher DePrano and Don Ecker, are giving you the salutes and thumbs up for another get-together. We apologize for last week's little snafu, but some things piled up and prevented us from bringing the show out to you live last week. But hopefully we can entertain and inform a little bit tonight. Starting with you, Christopher. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Been a great week, great time. Just doing a little studying on the show for tonight. And I think it's going to be a good one. I think we're going to have a good time.
And Decker, how are you this fine evening?
Maintaining, my man, maintaining.
So, any earthquakes, mudslides?
Not noticeable this week. Although, as we all know, California has its share. I've got a handy dandy little application on my cell phone that will tell me if there's an earthquake coming. It'll even sound an alarm. And so I'm ready. I got my water, my rations. Hey, we're set.
I've always been curious about the reports of UFOs around those kinds of phenomena. They seem to come and go, but it seems to happen more in less populated areas that the earthquake, and then I think a lot of times activity is interpreted as an earthquake for things going on. Of course, we've had a lot of theories about underground activity and some interesting stuff. Before we delve too far off, I wanted to bring up a super fan, David, out of Florida, who dropped me a note about our show a couple of weeks back, and he asked me to say, how come we didn't mention Bill Burns? I believe I'm saying the name right. I can look it up if I've got it wrong. And he said that Decker would know he was a big piece of the Roswell case, because we really did spend quite a bit of time talking about it. Maybe I've got that name wrong. Give me a couple seconds. I could probably drag it up.
No, you got it right.
So what do you think, Dex? What's the story there?
Well, when this gentleman mentions that Burns has a big chunk of Roswell, actually, no, not Burns, but Burns worked in connection with Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso. And then with Corso, Burns and Corso did the book The Day After Roswell. Now, Burns was also part and parcel in the latter stages of the life of UFO magazine, which was the magazine my wife began, and I was the director of research. But that is a story for another day down the road. But Corso, whom I got to know prior to his death, although he and I never met, we were going to meet physically, but he died before he was coming out here after he returned from a trip to Italy. But Corso was tremendously upset and steamed, claiming, not only to me, but to others, that Burns contributed a lot of his own ideas to the book, contrary to what Corso was saying. This is what Phil Corso told me. So, not being there, I don't know, but that is definitely the connection of Burns to the Roswell case.
Interesting. Did Burns do any other research? Because I looked around a little bit, and again, I thank superfan David for the contact and the point to make. I couldn't find out much about him.
Yeah, well, Vicky and I knew him and his wife very well, having worked with UFO Magazine back in about 2007, when I physically left research. Okay, I mean, I continued on with my radio show, but I no longer was much going out into the field,
right,
doing that type of thing. A lot of reasons why, but Burns and his wife, who pushed Vicky out of the chief editorial slot, basically started doing some stuff with the magazine, which we never countenanced in all the time that we published for over 20 years, where we zeroed in on cases, books, book reviews, interviews with witnesses, interviews with authors, all types of things. They basically brought in a slew of people that wrote opinion pieces that had shit all to do with the subject, okay? And Vicky got tired of it and left, and I hung on for a little bit, and then finally I threw my hands up and said that was it. And I wrote a paper called My 20 Years in the UFO Fog. And in there, I basically gave an overview of my time as a researcher, as a director of research, as an investigator, the people that I knew, the people that I had met, little vignettes about things that had happened through the years. Have you guys read it?
I've read all the papers you sent me.
Did you read that, My 20 Years in the UFO Fog? Okay, all right. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. And toward the end of the paper, I basically had several things that Bill had done that I voraciously disagreed with. One of them, toward the end, he brought a guy, and this guy used to be well known in the field, did a John Lear, went totally off the cliff, went into fantasy land, pixie farts, fairy dust, and all that kind of stuff. His name was Clifford Stone. And Stone had a 20-year career in the U.S. Army. He retired in SFC, Sergeant First Class, E7. And hell, you do 20 plus years in the Army, you don't hit Master Sergeant, you've done something wrong. But Stone gave Burns an article to put in the magazine that Burns did, that I would not have utilized as toilet paper. And this article claimed that while he was in Vietnam, he had this mysterious colonel that was involved in UFO stuff, that Clifford said in this article that he used to crawl out under the wire from his fire base to meet with this guy and give him UFO information and all this other horse shit, okay? This horse shit about aliens that had been captured, aliens that had been shot down, died. I mean, it was the shittiest science fiction you ever read. And I saw this before it went into the magazine. And Burns was not a veteran. He didn't know shit from Shinola about the armed forces. And I said to him, Bill, this is the biggest bucket of horse shit I've ever read. You're seriously not going to put that in the magazine. And he said, well, yeah, I think everybody ought to have their right to tell their story. And I said, Bill, for 20 years, Vicki and I vetted everything that went into that magazine. And if somebody made allegations like this, I demanded to see proof. Remember what I used to do?
Oh, yeah.
Remember be a cop? I used to be a detective. So anyway, he did it. So I said, fine. I demanded to write a story rebutting that, which I did. And I wasn't quite as, shall we say, as touchy as I appear right now, but I've had 15, 20 years to think about it. And it still kind of pisses me off. So I mentioned that kind of thing in my paper. Well, the next thing you know, I get a letter from UFO, because by that time we no longer were the sole owners,
Right.
from the lawyer for UFO magazine, cautioning me to curb my thoughts and feelings, I guess. Well, I used that to wipe my ass with, and that's the last I ever heard about it.
No.
So there you go. You got the real story there.
Don, why would he crawl under the wire? Why can't,
Fantasy, Chris.
Yeah,
fantasy.
I know. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, because usually around the wire they put like trip mines and land mines and everything. So I mean,
yeah, I know. I was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chris,
Yes.
Your work, you go through the same kind of vetting process, correct? I mean,
all the time.
We've looked at this a number of times in the past, and I've always been kind of staggered, but I think it's the times we live in, where now you just do publish anything that comes into your mind free form, and then just let the chips fall. So I'm going to bring it around. Now, we brought up Vietnam, so I want the audience to understand Part Deux, or Decker reminds us that Charlie Deuce does not surf, is a little bit of a play onto the Vietnam era in the movie Apocalypse Now, and they did the Part Deux when they did the extended version. And, of course, the Colonel Kilgore scene of talking to Lance about get their boards, and they take over the that beach so that they can surf, because it's the only place. And I remember because it's got the famous scene of him on the beach, and they're saying, "Sir, it seems a little bit hot to surf," and he stands up and he yells about hot. I'll show you hot, and he calls, and then the airplane that you see in there, that Skymaster, the little gray airplane that calls in the airstrike. That's the airplane I spend a lot of my time flying. Is Skymasters, doing very similar work. Now, bringing up, this is for Don to start. I sent Don, and I did send it to Chris as well, but I'm not checking up on Chris properly, so he'll catch up with us along the way.
Bad boy.
The HMAS, Her Majesty's Australian Service, Hobart, U.S. General says UFO battle twice in Vietnam. UFO U.S. Air Force battle in Vietnam. And Jack, you just really jumped on this guy.
Well, I'm aware of one incident purportedly up where I was stationed near the DMZ, not when I was there. This happened before I got there. But purportedly, an aerial anomaly was traveling south from North Vietnam. It was picked up by military radar. Da Nang purportedly launched two F-4s, two Phantoms, to go up and check this thing out. The radar had picked it up, and they went tearing out on afterburners. Now, It's true that during most of the war in Vietnam, the North Vietnamese very, very seldom ever sent aircraft down south. They did when we got overrun up on the DMZ on 30 March 72. But that was something entirely different. These phantoms got up there, they picked this thing up on their radar, and what the story stated was they fired on this thing with air-to-air missiles. Apparently, they achieved a hit. It was a hell of an explosion, okay, and this thing disappeared from the screens. The next day, now the Marines, the U.S. Marine Corps, was still all over Northern I Corps. This is long before Nixon started pulling the troops out. And they sent a recon patrol up there to where this event allegedly happened. And when they got there, they found, this is what I read, a huge burn mark, but no debris. Now, whatever the hell that was is anybody's guess. Now, during the Vietnam War, this is on a different street, if you will, same town, different street. During the Vietnam War, the American military lost literally thousands of helicopters.
Right.
Thousands. Okay? And lost them everywhere. Lost them in Cambodia. Lost them in Laos. Lost them all up and down South Vietnam. Even lost some in North Vietnam. Well, before the Easter offensive of 1972 hit, all right, and I don't think I'm talking out of school here, but there were some reports that we picked up that reportedly some UH-1s, those Huey helicopters, had been flying south from North Vietnam that landed down south of the DMZ. Now, there were recon people out there. The 101st was up in I Corps out of Camp Eagle. They had recon patrols running everywhere. The Marine Corps had recon patrols running everywhere. And allegedly, because I wasn't there, this is what I heard, what I read, allegedly a recon patrol observed one of these choppers come down, okay, American markings on them, but some Caucasians exited the chopper, went out, walked around the chopper, looking at the ground, got back on the chopper, and then flew back north. Now, it was highly unlikely from everything that was said that this was an American operation. The suggestion was that the North Vietnamese, and they were tricky little bastards, had gotten themselves enough parts and pieces of Hueys to put one or more together, and they were flying special operations using Soviet and East German troops that, at a distance, of course, could pass for an American. Now, what the hell they were doing, I have no idea. But that was another little story I picked up along the way, Deuce.
One of my favorite subtopics, a little bit off our chart here on the UAP side, is the use of other countries' aircraft that are recovered, flown by quote unquote the enemy. It's an amazing story. The first recorded instance that I've ever been able to track down was during World War One. The French had captured a damaged German biplane. They rebuilt it and they would fly it. And the way they would do it is they had the ability to put the rondelle out on the airplane was in France. When it entered into Germany, they would pull basically on lines and have it retract, and it had the German markings, and they were able to go do reconnaissance and probably even some attacks. It's very hard to, of course, locate, but I think that's probably the first instance. And all through World War II, this activity was going on recovered airplanes, and then right through the Cold War, old British airplanes that the then Soviets had were flying penetration reconnaissance missions into Western Europe. So it's a not an uncommon situation. I wanted to bring up, though, on that story that you just talked about, it was General George S. Brown, commander of 7th Air Force, who went on record after the war with his beliefs. And although the government had grouped all UFO sightings under the heading of enemy helicopter activity, Brown believed that in the case of the HMAS Hobart, which sustained damage from F4s, RF4s in this engagement, that the Hobart incident was a case of UFO interference in military operations. Doesn't get a lot of press, doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's to me, it's one of the more interesting cases that went on.
Well,
now,
Commander.
Yes.
Commander, wasn't at the time they knew that the North Koreans had helicopters, but they weren't really using them. So at first they thought it was a helicopter, I believe, right? 1968.
Right. So there's helicopter activity that did go on. You're correct. With the exception of what Decker was talking about, very little activity ever really showed up. And then it's almost taken for granted now that what was going on was most likely Soviet or Warsaw Pact forces that were working with the North Vietnamese to fly those aircraft, because they spent most of their time working to master the jets that they had, and they were getting obviously good results with that. And they couldn't move. Everything they moved was moved basically by truck and by foot on the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Or bicycle.
Right.
Or bicycle.
Which was a pretty amazing setup. So now, Decker, I brought up, and you wrote back a very funny line, the Captain Bill English story. Total BS. You said you knew this ass clown, which I think is a form of affection in your world when you use that term. Is that correct?
Bill English was, back in the very early days, a hot story.
All right. Now back up and explain the case of Bill English that started this.
Well, this was the story. Now, this, incidentally, I would be remiss if I would not relay where this story emanated from. John Lear.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you don't know who John Lear was, John Lear was an aviation pilot, a captain, flew large transport aircraft, mostly cargo. One critic that I knew very well also claimed that Lear was responsible for helping move gold out of the Philippines when President, what the hell was his name?
Imelda Marcos's husband.
Yes. The shoe lady. Yes, right. The shoe lady and her husband. Supposedly he moved a lot of gold out of there. I don't know.
John, didn't Lear work, or didn't Lear's father was an inventor? I think he was the inventor of the Lear jet.
That is correct.
William Lear, yes, was John Lear's father. An iconic name in aviation, among other things. Lear Sigler Corporation, right. It was all under him. He incidentally disowned his son, John. That's a story for another time. But anyway, in 88, let me just lay the whole story out for you. In 88, I was using my first computer that I had bought. It was a Radio Shack computer, a 1000EX. Today, the standards that you wouldn't even use that thing as a paperweight today. Okay, that's how primitive it was, but I loved it. That was my foray into an entirely new existence. Okay, and I really blew the pooch when I bought a modem for it that would allow me to contact other computers and things like CompuServe at $6 and $12 an hour. Now, with this computer, I started using CompuServe, and I had a 300 baud modem. Now, what that meant was, what a modem was, connected.
I think everybody here knows what a modem was. I think we all use modems.
But the audience?
Yeah,
the audience?
I think there's probably a good portion of the audience that doesn't remember the sweet, sweet sounds of getting a modem to go over your phone.
So anyway, 300 baud modem was as slow as you could go. And I could literally count the pixels on my screen as it was downlaying information. Okay. Now I went to CompuServe and I discovered something called the Issues Forum. And I was kind of curious, what the hell is this? I'm going through it. And I come across some reports of cattle mutilation. Well, that immediately piqued my interest because as a criminal investigator, I investigated 2 cattle mutes back in 81, 82. So I suddenly started jumping into this thing, and I discovered one of the administrators of this forum was a guy by the name of Jim Spicer. Now, Jim Spicer and I ended up becoming pretty good friends. He was the guy that literally I credit for putting UFOs on the internet. He had a bulletin board system called the Paranet system, Paranet Alpha, out of Fountain Hills, Arizona. And before it was all said and done, and before the internet really got going in the mid to latter 90s, there were Paranet nodes literally all over the world. Japan, Australia, Russia, Germany, France, England, all over the United States. And I was a system administrator of one of those nodes. Mine was Paranet Rho, R-H-O. So I'm going through this, and he has a paper up there that he had gotten from a guy by the name of John Lear, and he gave Lear's background. And I read it. This was the first paper that Lear had put out. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but there was some crazy stuff in that. And I read this, and I looked at his bio again, and I called Spicer up, and I said, "Is this guy for real?" He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "He is. He's who he says he is. His dad was Bill Lear, blah, blah, blah. He's a pilot." And I said, "Cool. Okay. Give me his phone number. I want to call him up." So I called him up. We talked for 3, maybe 4 hours.
Easy to do it, John.
Yeah.
The next week, a UPS truck, this is totally unexpected, pulled up in front of my townhouse. This driver got out and had this big package, and he brought it up and he knocked on the door and blah, blah, blah. I signed for it, and it was from Lear. And basically, it was at that time just about all the information Lear had that he was working on. Now, there was a lot that I did not know until later when I really dug into it, investigated it. But I'm going through this stuff, and one of the things I come across is this report about Captain Bill English, United States Army Special Forces, Fifth group. Well, let's say I had more than a familiarity with SF and fifth group. So I start reading this. And this was allegedly about an across-the-border op where Captain English and his Special Forces team crossed the border into Laos, and a B-52 had purportedly been shot down by the NVA. And they get over there to get the black box or whatever the hell the bullshit story was. And when they get there, they're in the jungle, they're looking through the leaves. There are ETs there picking up bodies and parts and putting them in big metal appearing drums or bins. Now, the suggestion, of course, is the aliens were going to take these away. So I read this and I'm thinking to myself, I would have heard something about that. So I call up Lear and he says, oh, yeah. He said, I checked them out. Bill English, I checked them out. Okay. So then, this had to be 89. Then the MUFON conference is coming up, the famous one, with Bill Moore and all the regulars MUFON had then. But Lear wanted to do something a little different on Sunday. So Lear called me up because at that time I was above my head in the research and investigation I was doing on human mutilations. Okay. And he said, Don, I read the first paper you put out there about that. Would you like to give a talk at MUFON on Sunday? This is 89, summer of 89. And I said, about my research? He said, yeah. I said, boy, I don't know, John. I'm going to have to think about that. He said, okay. All right. He said, well, let me know. You got to let me know by this date. So I said, all right. So anyway, I find out who else he's going to have on there. He's going to have, Lear's going to talk. He invited me. Bill English is going to talk. And another guy that ended up doing more damage to the UFO field than you could ever believe, by the name of Milton William Bill Cooper. So I thought about it. I went back through my data, all the research, the people I've talked to, law enforcement, and et cetera. And finally I decided, okay, yeah, I will do that. So anyway, I was interested in meeting this English character. So I get down there, and Bill English is being shepherded around by a guy by the name of Dick Scheffler. Now, Dick Scheffler was a neighbor of English where they were living at the time. And I'm talking to him, and look, I got a nose for bullshit, okay? And English is walking around with a bulletproof vest on. And I said to Scheffler, I said, what the hell's this? He said, he's he's worried that somebody might want to assassinate him. And I said, assassinate him at a MUFON conference? Are you serious? Oh yeah, because his story is so hot. I said, sweetheart, I've been doing investigations and can prove human mutilations. Don't you think that would be kind of hot too? I said, do you see a bulletproof vest on me? So anyway, later, after this weekend, Scheffler and English came up to my house. This is here in Southern California. And they stayed a couple of days. So I get a chance to talk to this guy. And then it became clear. This son of a bitch was as full of it as you could possibly imagine. I made some calls. I knew people throughout the southwestern U.S. Special Forces Association and other. Anyway, I ended up doing a real in-depth on this guy. Now, he was in the Army, yes. He did travel overseas to England, and you'll never guess what his primary MOS was. He was a telephone line repairman. So, I get back to Lear, and of course, Lear is, the CIA, they washed his background. Oh, okay. All right. That must be it, John. That must be it. But then some other things popped out about English that I discovered through law enforcement. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't want to defame the guy here. But let's just say he was not what he was cracked up to be, Deuce.
And I could never find anything that matched to this B-52.
There wasn't any.
That crashed.
Right.
Now, there
right.
obviously a number of B-52s were lost. But this story does have a lot of mythological kind of following. It also gets tied in with Project Grudge. And Chris,
now he had bullshit stories about Grudge too.
Right.
Oh yeah. I just want to say one thing about John Lear and a couple other things. One, John Lear, I believe, worked for the Central Intelligence Agency or was a contract pilot.
No,
he was a contract
pilot.
That's what I was saying, a contract pilot for the thing. There's always been rumors that Lear was also doing disinformation. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's out there in some points that John was creating stories for, misinformation and things of that nature. I haven't been able to vet that, but it's been out there. But one thing I do know is that, Don, you hit on something that is going around. Nobody wants to talk about it, is the human mutilation. Because, we have had reports where people have been abducted. And it's kind of strange because they say, I don't know if this is important. I'm really kind of worried about saying this. But I remember a part where I was on board this craft and I saw human body parts. So that was it. And then there was a story about an Air Force sergeant that was, I guess, in the New Mexico desert.
White Sands.
Right, White Sands, New Mexico. And he was found mutilated. And the story was that he was abducted and then left for mutilated.
That was a Bill English story.
Yeah. Now, we don't know if that's true or not. I mean, we do know mutilations have happened that are unexplained, but I don't take a lot of credit into what Bill English has to say about that.
Do yourself a favor and take nothing that he says as fact.
Yeah, I was trying to be polite.
Well, why?
Well, I don't know. I guess I probably don't want to be sued or something. I don't know. I don't give a shit.
Well, English.
I just don't have the Don Eckert, them sons of bitches attitude sometimes. What can I tell you?
I got to work on that, Chris.
I will say that I greatly love John Lear. He was exceptionally engaging. Every time I spoke with him, we had bitter disagreements about some of the conclusions that he came up with. I do want to say that his flying career was extraordinary. He was a very, very gifted pilot. He held every civilian rating you can hold in the United States, and that's all bona fide. He was a incredibly daring pilot as well. He was not afraid to hang it on the edge, and it dinged him up a few times very badly, to the point that he almost lost
his
a
feet.
leg. Yep, his feet.
His
feet
were at the end of his life. He couldn't even walk.
Right.
Yeah, but Lear made some really, out there
Yes.
statement, and he
Look,
hasn't
right-
been able to show it. I mean,
right
like,
before he died, I had not talked to Lear in quite a while, but I called him up and I said, John, it's been a long time since you've been a guest on my show, Dark Matters Radio. I said, I'd like to have you come on. Okay. So I said, now I'm going to question you. Yeah, that's fine. So anyway, halfway or 3/4 through the show, he starts this crap about, there's 50 or 75 million or something like that people living on the moon. And there's hundreds of millions throughout the solar system. And they're in Saturn and Jupiter. And I said, John, those are gas giants. Well, they're living out there. And I said, John, I said, you realize how that sounds, right? I don't care. I said, John, can you prove that? Look, you can either take me at my word or forget it. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
All right, whatever you say, John.
But I will
Anyway,
say
that's
this.
kind of a classic. That's a
John
classic.
discussed with me some of the things that he saw and was part of and around in the 80s and 90s. One of the operations of the work that he was doing was as a charter pilot was flying for a company that moved very sensitive materials around for the military, and he did a lot of work in that area. Very unforgiving work, I might add, because it's not well known and moving some very sensitive and dangerous things. And if you're good at it, and there's no doubt that he was a good stick for that kind of work. And
Let me tell you, I've been to his house several times. Okay. And been down in his den. I took a number of photographs. I think I sent you several.
I think you did when I was doing Task Force Griffin, because he had been on a couple times on the show.
And I sent you, showing you the photos and everything in the back, like G. Gordon Liddy, a picture of G. Gordon Liddy. Yep. And it was I saw this with my own eyes. It says, I never told the bastards nothing. Now we all remember who G. Gordon Liddy was, right? Sure, Watergate and all that. So anyway, so I'm down there, and John, and look, I've been around the block, and I can recognize theater sometimes when I see it. And over John's chair, he had a shoulder holster and a .45 automatic hanging on his chair. And I asked him, you expecting company, John? Oh, you never know. I said, okay. He said, but that ain't my best one. And I said, what's your best one? So he gets up from his desk, walks into another room, comes out toting a model 1928 Thompson submachine gun. The real deal.
A beauty.
Okay.
wow.
And I said, Class 3 license for that, John? Oh, yeah, I got it. It's legal. Okay, pal. I'm convinced. He's got a goddamn Tommy gun. He was ready.
Well, I love the man dearly. I enjoyed all the conversations. He was probably one of the nicest letter writers of an age that no longer writes letters. But he, after the couple shows we did and stuff that came up, he would write really nice letters.
Commander, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think towards the end of his life, some other things were affecting him. But I give him a lot of credit on, my passion of triangle.
Can you read this?
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
It's John Lear.
Yeah, I can tell it's John. I can tell the signature.
Yeah.
Wrote beautiful letters. I really enjoyed his.
Well, anyway, I'll read this to you after the show.
Okay. Well,
Anyways,
Chris?
I just wanted to say that John Lear, although I don't believe everything that John Lear came out of John Lear's mouth, he was a very charismatic character. I will grant him that. And he told a story that is, you could believe. I mean, he didn't put it out there so much at times that you say, oh, this guy's just full of crap. But he was very well taken, and people liked him, at certain times and stuff like that. But one of the things that John, I think, was the father to, was to start these stories about things happening in outer space as far as military and people living at places. And then it just expanded to people fighting blue chickens and space wars on Mars. And we went to Jupiter and destroyed another race over there. And we're, the part of the space galactic force, all of which we've gotten these stories that just kind of filtered from John Lear and now up. So it kind of puts a damper on what John Lear may be telling the truth, because the stories afterwards are so outlandish that you kind of go, I just can't believe these guys, and you lump it into. I mean, we talked about that one story where the guys were caught by the Black Berets and they gave up their guns and
Yep. No,
they were human
you make a
trafficking,
very valid
but nobody saw any humans. And how they left the landing zone. And then you get another guy that, I was a point man of this Marine team, and they came out and all this purplish goo was all over the place from this crash saucer, and I was on the retrieval team. And then the best one was I didn't have a clearance, but I was taken down and watched these things levitate, in a secret place that I was supposed to build a firing range, a shooting range on. And I go, they're not going to let you. You have no clearance or no reason to be down there. Why in God's name would you come up with a story that you saw things levitate, in a place that's so secret, and they're going to put a shooting range next to the door? What's next? A Chipotle's or a McDonald's? I mean, come on. This is what happens when you get some of these stories. They just get embellished so much that, the good stories, the true stories, get folded into this layer of.
Well, here's the dirty little secret about John Lear. John Lear, when I first connected with him, it was basically right after he went public. So in many regards, you can say I was there. Now, he really first came out in 1987. And that was at the MUFON Symposium in D.C. But by 89, 90, I mean, I was there for a hell of a lot of it. Now, I guess you could say because of what I did as a cop, I can be nosy. And if I have a question and I'm not getting it suitably answered, okay, I start to dig. If I put my teeth in it, I dig. Now, a lot of stuff that was in that big package that he sent me, there were a lot of questions in there. One involved something called Project Excalibur. Okay. And this was being described as an Earth-penetrating nuclear warhead to take out ET underground facilities. Okay? So that was something I talked to Lear about. And there's a point to this. So he said, well, I know the scientist that designed that. And I said, oh, that's great. Who is it, John? Can't tell you. Oh, you can't? Why not? It's secret. Okay, all right, I understand that. Well, later, I discovered who in the hell it was. Bob Lazar. And when I talked to Lazar about that, he said, nah, he said that thing was not nuclear. He said it basically was a bunker buster.
Right.
Okay. The kind of stuff that we used in Desert Storm and that kind of stuff. Well, there was some other stuff, something about a massive shootout between aliens and special forces, American special forces, in an underground facility that was allegedly jointly operated by the ETs and Americans at Archuleta Mesa.
Is that with Phil Snyder?
Well, I recognize Snyder, but I don't know. I don't know. So when I really started digging, okay, and buddy, you know, at UFO Magazine, you wouldn't believe all the people I've talked to. I
It's an
discovered
impressive list.
Paul Benowitz, okay? Now, we all know today who Paul Benowitz was. We know what happened to him. Benowitz was disinformed on a regular operational program by the AFOSI to the point where it drove him into a mental hospital. Now, back in those days, Benowitz had put out some stuff, mostly on BBSs like Paranet, on something called Project Beta. Project Beta was Benowitz's whole thesis and theory on the aliens coming down here, which 99% of it came from the Air Force itself. Benowitz gave all of that to Lear, and that was the basis of Lear's initial UFO foray, was this Paul Benowitz material. So that will give you an idea of what helped run John off the cliff.
Let me grab things there as we come up to our first break. As I said, there is an incredible cast of characters that you have been around, Decker, over the years. It's amazing, and knowing the relationships and the cross ties to so many people. It's really time for a book. It's really time to put a lot of that down on there. Chris, I know you have equal credentials in some of this in a more modern era. Obviously, Don being from almost the start with some of the key people because of the magazine, and because at that time magazines were the primary vehicle for this kind of information. You know, you had some television, but not much. There was some entertainment on it, but magazines really were the article of record, correct?
Yeah, I just want to go pivot back to what Don was saying. There's always been this story on the Archuleta Mesa in New Mexico about with Phil Snyder. Now, Phil Snyder was part of that, and it stemmed from him supposedly having the conflict, like Don was saying, of the aliens attacking U.S. Special Forces, and they got into it, and there was a big firefight. But nothing's been proven. There's been no spouses that come forward and said, hey, listen, I lost my husband. Even if they said it was a training accident, there's nothing that's ever been gone with that. Two, you know, Phil Snyder's death was something of a suspicious in nature, but they'd never ruled it a homicide. But that doesn't mean it wasn't. And because he did have a lot of information about what underground tunnels and everything else were being made. But also in this thing, I would imagine if there was such a firefight and we lost so many military people, something would have leaked out that, you know, because you have to explain to a spouse, you have to explain to certain people why all these people are now dead. I mean, you're going to lie about it, but you still have to come up with a lie. Does that make sense, Cobra?
It does. But without and like I said, we're rushing up against the break here. I do want to say that there are, I think, very effective ways that stories can be layered. We live in an age of disinformation now.
Sure.
We're living through that. That's not new. And I always go back to the Manhattan Project.
Well, look, we've had a lot of aircraft crashes.
Hold on, I'll pick it up on the other side. I want to miss our break, and hold it on time. But I think that there are ways to do that and be effective in doing that, and having folks that are that do have spouses that don't know what happened. And a lot of these operations, you didn't have people that were married that were allowed to be part of units. So there are things that happen. There are things that use other world events to cover up losses like that. Folks, you're listening to UAP Crossfire on KGR Radio DB. I want to welcome you to the other half of the show. We're headed for a break, and please stay tuned. We have an interesting second half that I want to discuss. Well, welcome back to UAP Crossfire on KGR Radio DB. My co-hosts, Chris DePrano, Don Ecker. We've been talking about the military response to UFO activity and incidents. I have a couple of cases I do want to go on, but there's a couple of things I do want to also make sure we don't miss. Number one, I want to say hello to Kathleen. She checked into the chat room. She is one of our more persistent.
Hello, Kathleen.
Yep, she's one of our more persistent and supportive listeners. Thank you very much, and thank you for putting a quick message into the chat room. Nice to hear from you again. Also, I often will run like most of us do on the break, but I'm in pretty good shape tonight. I really love the stuff that Mark D'Antonio puts out on SkyTour. That stuff, I love the way that stuff looks. So, folks, if you're out there and you're interested, it's a really unique things that he has put together out there. Okay. Decker, you brought to us some interesting new memoir that's out, and I'd like to start off talking a little bit about Mr. Elizondo's memoir and some things that you are concluding from it at this early stage.
Well, in full disclosure, I do not yet have a copy of it. I'm getting a copy. I haven't read it, but I did have the dubious pleasure of having a number of conversations with Lou Elizondo. Now, Tracy Torme, who's a very good friend of mine that died back at the beginning of the year, son of Mel Torme,
right?
The Velvet Fog, the great singer, and also, I might add, film star. Tracy, the one of the top screenwriters for Star Trek: The Next Generation, the guy that created the Sliders television series, John Rice Davies in it, and some other people. That he, very talented man, had a deep, abiding fascination on the UFO topic. Went back years. He knew Travis Walton very well, okay? Had traveled to Snowflake, Arizona a number of times.
Right.
He took him out in the wilderness where this allegedly happened. Tracy used to call me frequently anytime something would pop up in the UFO field. Well, a few years ago, there was a television series that ran for a couple of seasons on the History Channel called Unidentified. And this was a show that was examining the UFO topic phenomenon, and some of the people in it that were on almost every week: CIA scientist Hal Puthoff, Christopher Mellon, an Undersecretary of Defense in intelligence, okay, quite rarefied air up there. Lou Elizondo, allegedly the guy that headed up ATIP, okay, the Aerial Threat Assessment Program in the Pentagon, that Harry Reid, the late deceased senior senator from Nevada, appropriated in excess of $20 million for to finance it. He gave this information out in a press conference in 2017. So anyway, I had been watching this show, and Tracy wanted to know, do you know any of these guys? Tom DeLonge, I forgot, Blink 182. Now, how in the hell a rock and roller got in this mix, I have no idea.
Well, you got a screenwriter that's the son of a singer, so I think it all fits. But go on.
So anyway, I said no. He said, well, I'm going to try to track down Lou Elizondo. I said, okay, well, let me know how you do. Well, he tracked him down, got in touch with him. Lou Elizondo, because of who Torme was, immediately warmed up to him. And I said, you know what, Tracy? I'd love to talk to this guy. I'd love to get this guy on my show and interview him. What do you think? He gave me his phone number, and I said, well, let him know first before I call him cold.
Right.
Let him know that I'm going to be calling. So he did. So I called Lou up, and I told him who I was. Now, I couldn't determine. I think he knew my name, but I couldn't determine. But he said, look, I can't talk to you. He said, I got too much going on, and I knew the guy was busy. He said, but I'll call you at home this weekend. Well, the weekend came. The weekend went. No phone call. So I waited a week, and I called him back. And he said, this is a bad time. I can't talk to you. I got this going on and that going on. I'll call you the weekend. Well, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, it's my damn fault. The weekend came and went, no Lou Elizondo. So I called him back one more time, and he gave me the brush off. So I sat down, and I started to put on my detective hat, and I started to think about this. Why am I persona non grata with this guy? Well, for one thing, there's my reputation, because I think you guys will both admit I'm not much into the crap and the BS. I kind of try to bore to the center of the problem. That was one thing. But then something else hit me. 1992, the year I totally pissed off the Pentagon. And that was with the STS-48 shuttle mission, okay, on Larry King Live. And I basically destroyed that NASA scientist, Jim Oberg, on there. Made him look like a fool. They encrypted that live feed. So suddenly it became very apparent to me that my name somewhere in the bowels of the Pentagon is blacklisted, okay, for this field, UFOs. And somebody, I don't know this for 100%, but I'm going to give it a 95% probability. Somebody told him, stay the hell away from that guy. That's my guess. So now, how many hardcore interviews has Elizondo done?
Not hardcore.
Not really none hardcore that I've ever been able to track down.
There you go. There you go. So he's looking for the softballs, kind of like, well, our current political scene with the Democratic nominee. They ain't going to go out where there's somebody that's going to ask hard, direct questions. Bubba, ain't going to happen. Well, it ain't happening with Lou either. So when I get his book and I read it, then I'll be able to give you a more fully developed idea about Lou Elizondo. But at this point, I got to tell you, he's not up there in my top tier of people breaking this field open for disclosure.
You know,
Chris,
can I just
No,
Go
I
ahead.
want your thoughts on Lou and what Don's just said.
Well, I first met Lou at Cherry Hill when he was talking at a MUFON symposium, I think about 3 years ago. And he too had mentioned that he was wearing a bulletproof vest. What I thought was kind of odd because I go, who the hell's going to shoot him at a MUFON symposium? You know, I mean, I was buddy and him, and I'm like, you know, I don't understand why you're wearing a bulletproof vest, man. But hey, go for it, you know. So that was the first thing that kind of struck me odd. Then, as you were asking him questions, and he was getting some hardball questions, he would say, "I can't answer that because under section such and such and such and such of the Secret Act of whatever, I'm not allowed to, or I can go to jail, or I could do this." Now, after about 4 or 5 times him saying that, I'm kind of saying to myself, well, what's he doing up there? If he can't talk and tell us anything, you know, I mean, that's a nice safety. Sorry, I can't tell you because under the Secret Act or whatever act it was, you know, and I'm saying this is a bullshit act. So, I mean, that's what my first take. Then I started listening to trying to figure out where he was going with this. I think his kind of thing was a story because he first said, well, in the Pentagon, there's a big fight going because high-ranking officers said to me, Lou, you got to stop this because this is all demons and angels and it's revelations and it's the apocalypse and everything. And I'm like, okay, show me some proof. And then he goes, well, we can't really tell you anything all at once because the government says we got to spoon feed you a little bit at a time. Well, they're not giving us not even a spoonful. So, I mean, that kind of went by the wayside. And then the third thing he says is that he says, well, if the American people knew what was really going on, they would be so sober. Well, I mean, tell us. Don't just make these bold statements that put us out in Never Land and then say, I'll see you later, give me my check, kind of a deal. You know, I always believe, and I truly believe this, once an intelligence officer, you're always an intelligence officer. Once you work in that thing, you know, you got, even in retirement, you've got still connections to it, and there's somebody still handling you. It may not be as strict as, you know, I might believe. I think it's very strict because these guys know a lot of secrets and everything. Because remember, before he started working UFOs, he was counterintelligence. There's a lot of deep secrets he probably knew had nothing to do with UFOs. So, I mean...
Or it's all connected.
What's that?
Or it's all connected.
Or it's all connected. But, I mean, there's some things that just doesn't add up with Lou's story. And then this organization that he became with Chris Mellon and the guy head of Skunk Works at the time and everything else, it just kind of went to the wayside. You don't hear anything about it anymore. I think it was.
Are you talking about Stars to the Academy or Academy to the Stars? Yeah,
Academy to the Stars. You're right. And so you see that and you kind of go, well, what happened to this? I mean, I thought we were going to get some information. And every time you're on the cusp of getting something, they tease you right up to the point and they drop it off. So, I mean, now he's got a book, and I'm sure he's going to want to make money out of that book. So, I mean, you're going to hear some really interesting things, but you're not going to get the main course. And we'll see if he actually puts in this book the main course and really says something. But I think I agree with Don. I think he just leads you up this path, and then he cuts you off. I haven't seen anything where he said, I have absolute proof that aliens are walking the planet, like other people have said. I mean, they haven't proved it either. They haven't brought somebody up and say, hey, this is Joe, and he's from Saturn or Mars or wherever. But, I mean, he doesn't even, you know, give you that. So I'm not sure. I just think, like, he's being told what to say, how to say it, and once an intelligence officer, always an intelligence officer.
So, quick question, Chris. The bulletproof vest. I'm a little bit intrigued. Did he disclose that he had one on, or was it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he said
I don't
that he had
understand anybody that discloses they have a bulletproof vest.
Why
I
would
gotta
do
tell
that?
you, when I was a SWAT team sniper, bulletproof vest was always problematical. More and more people were able to get their
Right.
hands on them. We used to train. I would train if I had a good suspicion the guy had a vest on. First place I'd aim for the hip,
Right.
and then two in the head.
Right.
Okay. Now that will nullify that vest. Here's the other thing: anybody that's wearing a vest that discloses it to people he basically doesn't know, what a freaking moron.
Yeah, I was a little curious on that one.
Well,
Now, Don, hold on, Chris, 1 second. Don, in your case, when you were talking about Mr. English, the good captain, sergeant, whatever we had going on there, was he wearing one visible, or was it supposedly an undercover?
It was all bulked. It was all bulked up. You could tell he had it on. It wasn't outside.
Right.
It was
Okay, I was just
inside,
curious.
but it was a bulky. It was a bulky thing.
Well, that for that era, that's how they were in those era. I mean, you didn't have the lightweight that you guys finished your careers with that worked. So that they're very dramatic. Go ahead, Chris. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just saying that if he's that much in danger, right? If he's that much in danger where he's got to wear a bulletproof vest, he's going to be taken out by professionals. It's not going to be some person coming up with a 22 and shooting him in the chest.
No, it'll probably be a beautiful woman walking up to him, smiling, and she pulls out a silenced 22 and puts 5 in his head right there on the spot. That's how they do it.
Right. But I mean, I don't know. You just something like that you don't advertise because he would know better.
I think it's
if he was
really
just a regular
interesting little intersection between these two very diverse people, very distanced people, that this is an item. And once again, I never thought of MUFON symposiums as a shooting match. You guys, I've got a completely different view. I'm going to have to get my 6 in gear and get to a MUFON. I guess, and pack the helmet and the vest. For that one. I
guess the next one I go to, I'll be wearing body armor because
I guess interesting.
And stuff, right. But I mean, you got these crazy stories.
Well, the never having a really hard interview, watching how it rolled out. I was obviously not a fan of anything that. Senator Reid was involved with. I didn't like anything that he touched. I think it was an interesting part. His friend that I can't think of his friend's name, took over Skinwalker Ranch, right? Didn't he eventually? He's Bigelow. Say again.
Bigelow.
Didn't Bigelow take over Skywalker Ranch? Didn't he eventually?
Well, he bought it.
Yeah. So it's an interesting circle they travel in. Mr. Bigelow's got a very interesting space exploration, space support company. I've yet
deeply into UFOs.
Yep. I
was interviewed. Do you remember when Jesse Ventura had his television show on for a season or two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did a show on Bigelow. And the producer that did it, I knew her very well. She called me up and wanted to know if I would come on and be interviewed. And we had done some things in UFO magazine on Bigelow. So I gathered those up and went over and was interviewed. And he's a strange guy. Now, he knew my name. Now, how he knew my name, I don't know. It might have been from the magazine or something. But later on, Bigelow was looking for a guy to do commercials for his hotel system. They were going to run on, I guess, national TV. So I happened to know the guy, okay, the producer. And it was actually through Rich Saraday, my buddy. And he called me up. His name was Steve McMahon. He called me up and he said, hey, he said, how would you like to go on TV? And I said, doing what? He said, doing this commercial for Bigelow. Bigelow loves UFOs. You're Mr. UFO. What do you say? So I talked to Vicky and, yeah, okay, sure, we'll give it a shot. So McMahon and Richard, they put together this big thing. I went in, learned my lines. I think it was for American Express or something. I don't remember. But anyway, we shoot this commercial. McMahon edits it, says, this is great. So he runs over to Vegas to take it over to Bigelow. Starts playing it for Bigelow. Bigelow sees who it is, me. And he said, not with that guy.
So who got to do the ad?
I don't know. After that, I lost.
Oh, I'm going to have to start looking that one up. That I'd love to know what that.
Cobra, can I just say one thing about Elizondo? I want to pivot
absolutely.
Back
we haven't left it. Yeah.
All right. So in the article that we were looking at, this is a very important thing. And I'm not sure if I'm going to buy his book after reading this. So it says, in an interview, Elizondo said that he had firsthand knowledge of what he was discussing, but that his security clearances prevented him from explaining the source of his knowledge. He got Pentagon approval to publish his book, partly by attributing some of the information to other sources who commented had previously been approved. Elizondo also said he was not approved to discuss his involvement in any other secret projects beyond the program he once led. So where's the icing on the cake on this thing, I guess, is the best
Where's the beef? Where's the beef?
Yeah, where's the beef? I mean, he's basically telling you in this if this article is correct, he's basically saying, yeah, I know the secrets, but I ain't telling you, but buy my book.
Well,
so
it has become a way of transferring wealth to produce books. I mean, a lot of very larger than life people get extremely lucrative book contracts with really no intention of the book going anyplace. So, I mean, that's been talked about a lot. That happens with a lot of folks. Things can be very trendy. I will be interested to read it. Obviously, I never had the chops to get anywhere in the circle to talk to him, to ever get anything with it. But I have to say that until I read it, I'll be as charitable as I can. But there's just something about the situation with him that never made me comfortable. I never was Academy to the Stars. Seemed pretty weird to me, shaky at best from a standpoint. And I'm not trying to pile on. I'm just saying I didn't see the results. I mean, it was getting a lot of sensation. It was getting a lot of airtime. It was getting a lot of screen time, but it was fluff. I just wasn't seeing anything come out of it. In fact, if you think about it, it kind of was like a screenplay for a movie, not a super high production movie. You've got the rock star, you've got the people in government, you have the intelligence agent, the director, you have all these stuff coming together. And I always remember the movie, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. The guy that's the whole thing that I always had the feel for when I looked at it, because it just was every couple of weeks it was something else. Stuff was coming out. The people that were involved, talking about the money and the budgets that they had, and then it went out like a light. Now, I'm sure things are still going on. Great. Then we had the next tier of people that came out on disclosure that we talked a lot about on this show. That we had part 2 or 3 that came out on this in our more modern time. And again, I'm still in that same camp. A lot of interesting things, a lot of things that I've been curious. There's some strange terminology that were used by people that were or are in the military. But again, Chris, I come back to, what are some of these people doing for money? What's their source of being able to keep it together when they're no longer in the military? And then strange inclusion of events that or incidents or particular cases that most of the folks that follow this in this debunk cases. So I just I'm a little bit thrown off by it. Now, go ahead, Chris. I see you're ready.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say that, there's two things. One, they did do a series, but I don't think it lasted long, where they had Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and Ken Justice, who was the head of Lockheed Martin Scud Works at one time. That's the guy that really, I'm waiting for his book to come out, or Hal Puthoff's book to come. If those guys ever write a book, I want to be the first one to grab that, because Hal Puthoff and Ken Justice both would know what we got and what we don't have. But I don't think they'll ever write books on it and stuff like that. So, it's kind of like they follow this narrative where they bring you down this road and then they cut you off. And it's the same thing with David Grush. Oh, I got all this information, but I heard it secondhand, and I had to get approval on this, and I couldn't say these things. Same thing. It's the same pattern as Lou Elizondo. So you got Grush. The only one that I really think that was trying to get it out was Carl Nell, who was David Grush's boss. Because, he actually sat for an interview, and he actually said, yeah, they're walking around here.
Right.
And he was he said, they're absolutely here. They've been here, and there's no thing out. Now, he didn't say, hey, there's a saucer at, Lockheed Martin or anything like that, but he was extremely more convincing than the other two.
In Southeast Asia, we had a term for this kind of business. It was a dog and pony sex show. Okay, that was the term, and basically that's what you're getting with these guys. Elizondo, even more so now that I think about it with this book. Grush, I kind of feel sorry for Grush, but he allowed himself to be put into that position. Now, he has his own problems, which he ended up having to go public about. And that's where I felt bad about it, because he was basically outed by some of these scum suckers agency, okay, that wanted to shut him up or make him look bad.
He had to know this was going to happen to him. He's not a dumb guy. David Grush had to know. He says, if I put this out there without permission, they're gonna fry my ass. Right?
Right.
We've seen that before.
Well, you got anything?
My paper is I think the bottom line on it at this point.
Sure.
I haven't seen anything that would push that aside. There is something. Maybe my conclusion is not the answer, or maybe it's only part of the answer.
Right.
But whatever it is, there's that core secret that is surrounded by a special access program folder. And buddy, that's it right there. You can kiss disclosure on the ass going out the door.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see disclosure. Don, I tell you, I think that there's something so deep, so dark, so dangerous in their eyes that if they said, if we put this out here, we could have turmoil.
Or so dirty a deal that you're never going to fess up. We had a couple of incidents, 50s and 60s, where atomic weapons were accidentally dropped or involved in aviation mishaps. And it took forever for some of those stories to ever break loose. Multiple decades in most cases, because they never wanted John Q. Public to lose faith and who's hauling stuff around and what we're doing and how it's being done or where things were at, methods and sources, all those things. And it's valid. Much of it is valid. You do not want to put troops at risk. The three of us agree.
Unless I'm mistaken, there's still one or two loose nukes out there, aren't there, Deuce?
Well, in the ocean, there's been some that we have never recovered. I always think back to the case, I believe it was near Albuquerque, where it inadvertently left. The pilot actually did the defensive maneuver, the delivery maneuver to get away because he wasn't sure if it was going to go. And they were able to recover it. Obviously, it didn't go off, thank God. But this next piece brings us into what I think sometimes is also part of the game. So last weekend, not this past one, but the week back, my email exploded talking about Palmdale. Now, it was very interesting to me on Palmdale because I have in my other life, I've got some work that's headed that direction. So I've spent a little time looking at the facility there and getting some stuff. It's a very critical place. It's a very sensitive place. I did in the past actually have a couple instances to operate out of there to get fuel and then head off to other things. And UFOs at Palmdale, landing at Palmdale. Now, I sent you guys out the story.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to give a big tip of the hat to the War Zone. That's the name of the site, twz.com. I have had the founder and the lead of the War Zone on my show a few times. He was also very frequented on KGRA in the past. Tyler Rogaway, super guy. They do an absolutely great job. If you're interested in military topics of all flavors, of all styles, and they're not afraid, and they never have been afraid to go right to speaking about UAP and UFO activity. They break a lot of stories. They put fact, and they let you know when they're putting opinion. So twz.com. I urge anybody in the audience that's interested, hit them up, get that into your routine. Heck of a lot of good information. So I waited. I also got from Kim another shout out to a super audience. Kim is up in Canada. I've known him for years through KGRA shows that I were on. He sent me the first piece, and I started to look at it, and to me, it was pretty shaky stuff. But then it wasn't. And what I mean by that is, immediately people insert it into this social media cause. You're seeing people with phone activity. One of the scenes that comes up isn't even at Palmdale. And some really sharp people out on the internet tracked it down pretty quick to a UAS, unmanned aerial system, or uncrewed, I think is the proper way to say it now in the new times that we live in. The shows that they do, where you have multiple drones, for lack of a better term, flying with lights on and off, and they can do shapes in the sky, and they put on an aerial display, normally at night. So it was obvious that some of the stuff that was being claimed was going on didn't. Then you had reports that craft had actually landed, possibly one had crashed. The video was coming in, going up. First thing that comes up out of this case is that law enforcement's not getting any of these reports. There isn't like a flood of 911 calls going off, which is generally not the kind of things that happen. Next part that's interesting that comes out of this is it reminds me of some of the things that happened off the coast where the Navy was reporting drone swarms, if you remember that.
Yeah. Circling
ships going on. And then that kind of dropped out. And they even allowed sailors who had cell phones to make videos of this. And those videos were able to get uploaded, which is extremely interesting when you think about that. The use of phones when you're on the ship normally would be fairly restrictive. Areas that you would never allow to bring that kind of a device into that are secure. and then having that information go out and have it go out. Now, in the case of Palmdale, I am convinced that you're looking at one of two or maybe three possible cases. One is you have enemy factions that are using this as a means to test base security, to gather intelligence, exploit information. The other part is could be our own military doing that kind of testing, doing that kind of probing to see how good the defense is. We're spending a lot of time and money because of the Ukrainian war right now on how we are going to defend against drone and drone attack. It's obvious that it's becoming a very critical node in our warfare, especially in the network warfare that we're facing. And then finally, this came up from one of my coworkers who I was describing this because he was a little curious about what I do on Thursday nights, and I was explaining it to him. He goes, well, my call sign at work is a little bit different than the call sign on the show. He says, if you buy these and you upload anything, he goes, if they came from China, if they came from the PRC, there's embedded code in there that's going to allow complete access to everything that you photograph. That's just going to go immediately be triggered in. So I asked him, I said, well, what do you think the chances are that if you bought this and you show some real promise, that you get approached to do some looking, maybe for a little notoriety or maybe for some money. And he thought it was a pretty interesting possibility. Gentlemen, I take it back to you. Did our U.S. military use the UFO scare as a way to maybe tap down or just dampen it down a little bit, a very serious security risk at Plant 42, which is one of our more sensitive places where black projects are put together and flying? Is that what happened? Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, there's something a little strange about Plant 42 because it says that it's connected to a regional airport.
Yeah, it's just shared. It's not.
Right,
it's not that unusual. It really isn't.
They have Lockheed Martin and highly classified projects to a regional airport.
Yep. Well, so let me explain the regional airport. It started out World War II as a Army Air Force field. Then the town, as it went on, it's very close to Edwards. The B-21 is being worked there. Lockheed's there, Northrop's there, Boeing's there. All the big players are there. They have very sensitive facilities, and part of the airfield is available as a regional airport. There's not a lot of regional airport activity going on there, but you can imagine the types of business type airplanes for people that are involved in those projects transiting in and out of there. The town of Palmdale jointly owns it. It's a joint civil military airfield. I know it sounds extremely crazy that you would ever have this kind of activity going on and have a regional airport at it. But there's some very practical reasons to do that. There's some very practical reasons that exists the way it does.
I just look at Area 51, and these guards are just dying to shoot somebody out there that crosses the line.
Area 51, completely different animal. And I'll explain why. Area 51 is someplace where something that is made at Plant 42 may go out to do operations. It's buried in the range activity of Nellis Air Force Base. This is not. This is at the end of a test range. We know that we're going to build the B-21. We also know it obviously was a big deal for the reveal when it came out and successfully flew. Phenomenal project, by the way. I'm so happy to see that airplane operating the way it is. It's a phenomenal airplane. And it's critical to our security. But it came out of this area and it flew up to Edwards, and it was done during the day. Other airplanes that operate there, if they don't fly out successfully at night and not to be seen or to minimize it, they're trucked out. They're brought out undercover, and then they go into places like 51 and Dugway and other places. So there is a little bit difference. Why would we reveal what we're doing on some of those sensitive airplanes? Because we want the bad guys to know we have this capability, and this capability is working. There are reasons that you do show the saber as opposed to just rattling the saber. So there's reasons that happens. There's also other things that are going on there that are modifications to planes, enhancements that go on, the research that goes on, and it allows, there's a lot of folks that work in that part of it. So that's the reason why. That's also the reason why it's a real cherry of a target for this new way to go out and do reconnaissance. Again, I don't know. Did we do it ourselves to probe it, to prove or to check defenses? Or
I just remember years ago, and Don, I think you might know about this project. Remember Dick Marchenko? He did SEAL Team 6.
Know him? I knew.
Right. So
Marchenko pretty well.
Yeah.
I knew the cock breath.
Well, what was his plan? His plan, he created Red Cell, which
Right.
very little people knew about it, but their main objective was to infiltrate American bases to show where their weaknesses are.
Sure.
So and of course he went to jail because he pissed off a bunch of admirals, as he broke into nuclear sites and showed, hey, we could literally steal a nuke. And his team was very good. I mean, these guys were the best at SEAL Team 6 and put into Red Cell. So, yes, that does happen, Commander. I absolutely agree with you. And, we have that. And so we just maybe turned up the technology to use it to infiltrate bases and see how, because everybody is talking about we're going to get hit here. It's not if we're going to get hit, it's when we're going to get hit.
Okay.
And I think the Pentagon knows that too.
All right, let me ask you something though, Chris. All right, I'm with you. Why do we have lights on them? And why did the story go out that it was UFOs?
Disinformation. Why
were they lit up? Why are so many UFOs have lights? Anti-collision lights. I'm just not buying.
Here's what a good friend.
We reverse engineer a craft, and we want to keep in the good graces of the FAA. We're going to put on conventional anti-collision lights so that we can fly around at night.
Here's what a good friend said to me, Chris. If I traveled light years to get here, what do I need headlights for? Which is, it makes a lot of sense. The reason for it. If we can go in different directions. We can say it's a disinformation campaign. It's a way to concoct a story. It's a way of whatever type of secret they want to do to keep it a secret. I mean, their plans are so deep sometimes, Commander, that it's going to take a lot of people talking about it in order to figure out what the hell this government's got on their mind. I mean, that's a question we can go in 5 different directions in.
Well, right now there's a question if it has anything on its mind.
Well, that's true. But before we delve down that rabbit hole, Don, give me your take on the Palmdale UFO scare.
I think it's probably our stuff. I think it's like he was talking about, Marchenko, doing tests to see what happens, who's paying attention. Now, that's not to say that there might have been 1 or even 2 legitimate unidentifieds flying out there. Hey, these things have had an inordinate amount of interest in a lot of our sensitive sites, going back to the very beginning in 47.
Right.
The Hanford nuclear power station, the reactor, these things were snooping around there. Roswell, the 509th, the only place on the planet at the time with nuclear weapons. Maybe every once in a while they just like to see what the farm animals are up to.
So
Let me
But
ask you.
more than that, I think it's probably our stuff.
So
Let me ask you a
go
commander
ahead.
question.
Sure.
How far away is that base from Mexico?
It's a pretty good distance. It's not an easy jaunt up the road. Um, Palmdale is very close to the high desert, coming out of like basically done about an hour out of Los Angeles, north.
Apple Valley is up
Yeah.
there.
So let me throw this out there. We know the Iranians have drones in Mexico. I mean, that's been
Sure.
said. So how do we know it's not a Chinese or enemy drone? Iranian drone being worked out of New Mexico.
I just don't know why.
Their drone technology is very sophisticated.
Well, who knows what the hell's come into this country?
Right. I
In
mean,
the last
And
quite
there you
honestly,
go.
I would imagine you could probably set up shop in that part of the world with the way that the border situation is, with a great amount of ease. So here's the next thing I want to throw into you, Don. You kind of touched upon it. Could this be a way to distract from actual activity by having the disassociation of having these things flying? Meaning,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. Look over here.
right.
While I'm doing something over here.
With lights and interesting parts of it, knowing that people have cell phones and everyone's doing that, and now deeper and on a darker part of that facility, you have other things that might be seen but are mixed in with it. To me, there's something, and again, the warzone.com, I thought did a really good job. They kept the emotion part of it pretty strict. They put the facts. They covered a lot of things out, and they went back to make sure. But I gotta tell you, the original things I was reading and seeing that were coming to me on emails were it was H.G. Wells and the Martians had landed, and it was a very small group of people that apparently were reporting it. And then immediately there were people that were inserting other things into it, doctored files. They were uploading those, saying this is what just happened. And it was to me, it was a very interesting case to look at, because
sounds like a classic disinformation operation.
And with multiple layers. Let's say that the disinformation is part of it. The disinformation is because there hasn't been a lot of public discussion since this article that we have a dangerous situation where we had a foreign power operating and doing activity, much like what we had with the Navy ship that showed the pictures of all these UASs flying around. It kind of reported as a UAP event. The Navy, no one knew what was going on, how they were flying. They swarmed around the ship. Things were photographed, videoed. It was allowed to go out, and then it went away. It seems to me like there'd be a major stink about it to me.
Because they lied their ass off.
You know, we should have learned a lesson on December the 7th, 1941 at Pearl Harbor. Okay. Now, how many times have there been incursions like this? And my question is, at least initially, we have no idea what it is, what it's doing, what its intentions are. Why aren't we or someone shooting these things down? Have we forgotten how to do that? Until you know, can you really take the chance?
To me, when you see things like this going on, and you do not draw fire, it's either the word's been put out that somebody like the Red Cell, or whatever we're going to call them, is operating in an exercise, and you're going to be probed and you're going to be trained. And yep, you're watching some people, they make the report, and it goes. You're right, Don. If these things are happening, especially in the times that we're living in now, just after the recent events globally that have gone on. Ukraine, Israel, and not Hamas, Gaza.
Hezbollah.
Yeah, well, not Gaza. I was gosh, how about the geography? What Iran did when they sailed all the stuff over?
The Houthis.
You would imagine
They just blew up a big oil tanker.
Yeah.
In the last day or so.
Yeah, the Houthis in the Red Sea. Yeah, the Greek tanker that lost. You would think that people would be just a tad bit more on edge around bases. We've had a lot of base activity with folks that have no reason for probing the bases that are trying to probe. There was gunfire activity, I believe, in San Antonio outside the gate of the Air Force Base, the major Air Force Base. So you're right. Why didn't this not turn into something else? Why was it so muted beyond what came out in social media? So next part. I couldn't find any true public statements except for what reporters, when this finally came out, when they approached the police department. Well, the only thing that was out there. There wasn't a lot of news stories on it. It was new media. It was people with cell phones, and then folks that have sites that were receiving this thing that was starting to put up, and then it went quiet and fizzled out. Okay, we're coming down towards the end of the show. I want to put another shout out on some stuff. Someone that everyone here knows very well. I've been reading and picking up Stan Gordon's newsletter. He sends stuff out. He puts an activity report out. He's had some really, really great items in the last couple outputs that he put. There's a great story. In fact, I sent a link to Mark. Hopefully Mark D'Antonio will join us next week, and he got that link discussing, or I wanted him to discuss, a cryptid that is seen in this little video clip and the explanation. It took place in West Virginia, and very interesting area to me, partially because I spent quite a bit of time out there. My final wrap up to both of you as we do this. Are we seeing more or less UAP/UFO activity?
Let me start. They're, of course, still out there. Excuse me, I've got a little congestion in my chest. It's been giving me fits for the last few days. They're still out there, but take a look around at the current news cycles.
Right.
Most people right now that are paying attention to the UFO subject got to be disappointed. When's the last time that we've really heard anything emanating from government about UAPs? It's been a long time. Everything else, I think, Commander Cobra and Chris, is going to be pushed off the front pages until at least November. That's my feeling. Unless it was something extraordinary that happened, but it would have to be pretty damn big.
I think that makes a good point, Chris.
Well, I just think that right now people are just disgusted the way the government is working this. And they said, you know what, screw it. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why. Because everybody had their hopes on Arrow and Fitzpatrick. And they say, oh, he's going to get to the bottom of it. He's going to interview Grush. He's going to do this. None of that ever happened. And he came out and he told Senator Gildebrand, said, I have no evidence that extraterrestrials are involved. And then as he leaves to go into this cushy job, he also turns around and goes, hey, I did all this research and everything. My team did all this research, and there's nothing that shows there's any proof of extraterrestrials or life outside. What a bunch of, hockey pucks that is. Come on. I mean, that is such garbage. Yeah, you sit there and go, you know what? I don't give a shit about what this guy says, and I don't care anymore about this. And I think that was on purpose. I think they want to divert people to start thinking about something else. The government has these plans where they say, I want this on the agenda now. And they say, okay, we'll concentrate on UFOs, or we'll concentrate on the war in Ukraine, or we want to concentrate on the war in the Middle East. And who knows what it'll be? Maybe next month it'll be, and I'm being, facetious here, but maybe they'll come up with the idea, hey, let's have an alien invasion. I mean, it's crazy, but our government does crazy things.
No doubt. But I think both of you have touched upon a number of things. When it's convenient to entertain the masses, but it's also, I think, Don, you really have captured something. Our attention cycle is very short now. We're practically down to minutes. People don't read articles even when they look online. They're looking at pictures, they're looking at captions, and then they swipe to the next thing and the next thing. And then you get a message and the next thing. And that's conditioning a lot going on. Now, in this particular election cycle, there has been some interesting things that were talked about by the candidates at the national level and local levels. But as Don said, it's dropped out it's not part of the subject anymore. It's not going.
Well, there's something else, Commander Cobra.
Go ahead.
And there's something else in play here. It's been for quite a while. And never in my life have I seen, and I came back from Southeast Asia in 1972. I voted that year in my first presidential election in November. So November 72 was the first time I voted. Well, looking around today and all those years since then, it's been 52 years now, I have never seen the derangement that I have witnessed in the last couple of years.
No doubt.
I mean, things like somebody wearing a red ball cap and everybody loses their mind. Okay? I can't get over that. Now, that I am convinced that sure as God made little green apples, that's by design, my friends.
I'm holding you there. I got to hold you there to the next show because we're at the end of it. I want to thank everyone. As I always try to end the shows, God's peace that passes all knowledge and understanding. UAP Crossfire, KGR Radio, DB, Chris DePrano, Don Ecker, yourself, Commander Cobra. Thank you so much for joining us. And a special shout out to Dennis and Kathleen, super fans that contact us. Be safe and look forward to talking to you all next week. Be good.